What if love didn't follow the rules you thought you knew? What if family wasn't just blood, but something deeper, shared trust, respect, and a bond beyond convention? Join Eleanor's journey as she leaves everything behind to discover a new kind of love in the majestic mountains, where hearts intertwine and lives change forever. This is a story of courage, transformation, and the unexpected paths that lead us home. If you're ready to explore a love story unlike any other, one full of heart, courage, and hope, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Join us and witness a journey that will challenge everything you thought you knew about family and love. Eleanor Grant sat alone in her small Chicago apartment, the late afternoon light filtering through grimy windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. The city buzzed outside, distant sirens, muffled conversations, the steady hum of life moving relentlessly forward. But inside, an oppressive silence wrapped around her like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Her eyes were fixed on the blank screen of her laptop, but the words she had promised to write for her latest legal brief were nowhere to be found. Instead, memories swirled uninvited, fragments of a life once vibrant but now faded into a dull monotony. She glanced at the unopened mail on the coffee table, a stack of bills, a couple of letters from her estranged daughter Anna, and a worn envelope with no return address. Eleanor's heart tightened as she imagined the disappointment behind those letters. A mother who had chosen her own escape over the steady presence Anna had once craved. Her reflection caught in the dark screen of the laptop. Tired eyes, faint wrinkles that no makeup could hide, a mouth set in a permanent line between resignation and yearning. At 50, Eleanor felt invisible, trapped in a life defined by endless cases, long nights, and a gnawing loneliness that no professional success could fill. The divorce papers lay on the dining table, untouched since the morning. She hadn't mustered the courage to sign them yet. It was as if acknowledging the finality of the union would shatter the last fragile pieces of herself that remained intact. In a sudden motion born from a mix of restlessness and desperation, Eleanor stood up and walked toward the window. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and looked out at the gray skyline, the drab buildings looming like silent witnesses to her quiet unraveling. The city, for all its noise, felt emptier than ever. Turning away, her gaze fell on a colorful brochure lying forgotten among the bills, a promotional flyer for travel to Bhutan. She picked it up absent-mindedly. The cover showed towering, mist-covered mountains, fluttering prayer flags in vivid reds and yellows, and a solitary temple perched on a cliff edge. Eleanor's breath hitched as a sudden pang of something unfamiliar stirred inside her, a faint whisper of hope, a fragile yearning for something beyond this life of legal briefs and solitary dinners. She flipped through the pages, reading about the peaceful villages nestled in the Himalayas, the ancient traditions untouched by time, and a way of living that celebrated simplicity and connection. For the first time in years, Eleanor's mind stopped racing. The chaotic noise in her chest quieted, just a little. She sat back down, the brochure resting on her lap like a secret invitation. The phone vibrated on the table, but she ignored it. Calls from work, reminders of meetings she was supposed to attend, emails from colleagues. None of it mattered anymore. A slow, almost imperceptible tear traced a path down her cheek. Not for sorrow, but for relief. Eleanor closed her eyes and whispered to herself, barely audible, maybe it's time to be lost. And in that moment, beneath the flickering light of the city that had held her captive for so long, something inside her cracked open, a fragile door to a new beginning. The morning air was cold and crisp as Eleanor Grant locked the door of her Chicago apartment for what she knew might be the last time. The key clicked in the lock, and an unfamiliar weight settled in her chest, not of finality, but of release. No one was waiting for her downstairs, no tearful farewells, no tentative "are you sure?" or "call me when you arrive." Just silence. Perfect, quiet silence. Her suitcase, battered and modest, stood by the entrance, packed the night before with the bare essentials, a few changes of clothes, a journal she had never touched, and the well-worn travel brochure that had ignited this sudden, reckless decision. Eleanor walked through the streets to O'Hare Airport without a glance back. The city was waking up, the usual cacophony of honking cars, hurried footsteps, street vendors shouting their morning specials. But Eleanor felt like a ghost drifting through a world that had moved on without her. She passed a small cafe, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee made her stomach twist with hunger and longing. But she didn't stop. The day was not for indulgences, it was for escape. At the airport, Eleanor moved through the terminal with the detachment of someone watching herself from afar. Check-in lines, security checks, boarding calls, all mechanical motions she executed without thinking. She noticed the hurried faces around her, travelers clutching loved ones, sharing last embraces or quick kisses before departure. She felt no envy. She only wanted to disappear into the belly of the plane and be transported far away from everything she had known. There were no calls to her phone. She had turned it off the night before. No messages to remind her of responsibilities or regrets. The freedom in this absence was both thrilling and terrifying. As she settled into her window seat on the airplane, Eleanor pressed her forehead gently against the cool glass, watching the tarmac bustle with activity. Planes taking off, landing, people rushing to meet flights. Somewhere in that vast world was a place she had never been but was beginning to imagine. Bhutan, a land whispered about in stories of peace and mountains touching the sky. She felt the engines roar beneath her, the vibrations traveling through the frame of the plane and into her bones. The moment the aircraft lifted off, leaving Chicago's skyline behind, Eleanor closed her eyes. No tears came, only a steady deep breath, the kind that reaches down into your very soul and unsettles the dust that's been gathering for years. She thought of her daughter Anna, probably waking up now, checking her phone to find no message, no warning, no explanation. Guilt flickered briefly, a shadow, but it was quickly swallowed by something stronger, hope. Hope that this journey might one day bridge the silence between them. For the first time in decades, Eleanor felt the exhilarating thrill of the unknown stretching out before her like an uncharted map. She was leaving behind her legal briefs, her cold apartment, her loneliness, and stepping into a story still waiting to be written. The clouds passed beneath her like cotton, and as the plane soared higher, Eleanor felt herself lift too, away from the past, toward a fragile, uncertain future. She whispered softly, barely audible over the drone of the engines. "Here's to the lost, and to those who find themselves." And with that, the city disappeared beneath a sea of clouds, and Eleanor Grant began her flight without goodbye. When Eleanor stepped off the small plane onto the tarmac of Paro Airport, the first thing that struck her was the silence. Not the oppressive silence of loneliness she knew so well in Chicago, but a profound, almost sacred quiet that seemed to breathe with the very air around her. The sky was a clear, piercing blue, stretching endlessly above jagged peaks dusted with snow. The mountains rose like ancient sentinels, their vastness dwarfing everything beneath them. Eleanor felt a sudden rush of something she hadn't experienced in years: awe. The cold mountain air filled her lungs with a crispness that felt like purity itself. It was as if each breath cleansed away decades of stale city smog, anxiety, and regret. Her heartbeat slowed, syncing with the rhythm of this new world. As she walked out of the airport, the hum of engines faded, replaced by the distant sound of prayer flags fluttering softly in the wind. Vibrant reds, yellows, greens, and blues danced against the rugged landscape, carrying ancient prayers whispered by the monks and villagers. Eleanor's senses were alive in ways they hadn't been for years. The scent of pine and damp earth mixed with the faint aroma of incense drifting from a nearby monastery. Her skin tingled from the cool breeze, and for the first time in a long while, she felt connected, not just to the earth beneath her feet, but to something deeper, something sacred. The village she traveled to was small and unassuming. Wooden houses with sloped roofs, smoke curling from chimneys, and children's laughter echoing through narrow dirt paths. The pace of life was slow, deliberate, and calm. Strangers smiled gently, greeting her with nods and curious glances, but never intrusive questions. Eleanor found herself wandering down to a small river, where crystal-clear water rushed over smooth stones. She knelt to cup the water in her hands, letting it flow over her fingers, cool and refreshing. The sound of the river was a gentle song, steady and timeless, grounding her in the present moment. Sitting by the riverbank, Eleanor closed her eyes and let the mountain air wash over her. Memories of her life back home, the stress, the loneliness, the relentless chase for success, felt like a distant echo. Here in this peaceful village nestled between towering peaks, time seemed to stretch, slow down, and make space for healing. She felt tears quietly roll down her cheeks, not tears of sorrow, but of relief. A release of burdens she hadn't realized she was carrying. As the sun began to dip behind the mountains, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, Eleanor opened her eyes and smiled softly to herself. For the first time since she left Chicago, she felt a fragile, trembling hope. Here, amid the breath of the mountains, maybe she could find the peace she had been searching for. Eleanor returned to the river the morning after her arrival, drawn by the soothing murmur of flowing water and the quiet promise it held. The air was crisp, tinged with a faint scent of pine and wet stone, and the sky was painted with soft pastel hues as dawn stretched its first light over the mountain peaks. She found a flat rock by the riverbank and sat down, letting her fingers trail in the cold, clear water. The river seemed alive, whispering stories of ancient times and timeless journeys. As she closed her eyes to listen, a soft rustle in the nearby bushes stirred her from her reverie. Opening her eyes, Eleanor saw a man stepping lightly along the river's edge. He moved with a quiet grace, as if he belonged to the mountain itself, steady, calm, and unhurried. His skin was weathered by the sun, and his dark eyes held a gentle kindness that immediately put her at ease. He wore a simple woolen robe, its fabric worn but clean, and around his neck hung a small carved talisman, glinting softly in the morning light. Eleanor felt a sudden connection, an unspoken understanding that needed no words. The man paused a few steps away, nodding respectfully. He spoke softly in a language Eleanor did not understand, yet the warmth in his voice transcended the barrier of words. She smiled shyly, unsure how to respond. Slowly, she lifted her hand in greeting. He smiled back, a genuine open smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Without speaking, he gestured toward the river, then to himself, then back to her, as if inviting her to share in this sacred place. Moved by an impulse she could not explain, Eleanor nodded and scooted closer to the water's edge. The man sat beside her, and for a while, they simply shared the silence, two strangers bound by the quiet pulse of the mountains and the river's song. As the morning light grew stronger, he reached into a small woven basket and pulled out a handful of wildflowers, placing them gently in Eleanor's lap. The gesture was simple but profound, a welcome gift from this stranger who seemed to embody the spirit of this tranquil land. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of being seen and accepted without conditions or questions. Over the next days, the man, whom she would come to know as Karma, became a steady presence in Eleanor's new world. He never rushed her, never demanded explanations. Instead, through small acts of kindness, quiet companionship, and shared moments by the river, he helped Eleanor begin to unravel the tight knot of loneliness and pain she had carried for so long. With Karma, there was no need for grand gestures or promises. There was only the simple, honest language of presence, a language Eleanor longed to learn. Dinner without words. The evening descended softly over the village, wrapping the mountains and wooden houses in a gentle, cooling shadow. The air was fragrant with the scent of wood smoke and simmering spices, a reminder that night in this place was marked by quiet rituals and simple comforts. Eleanor felt a mixture of nervousness and curiosity as Karma led her along a narrow path toward a modest home nestled between fields of barley swaying gently in the breeze. The light from a single lantern flickered through the window, casting warm amber hues onto the weathered wooden walls. Inside, the room was humble but alive with a quiet hum of daily life. A small fire crackled in the hearth, sending dancing shadows across the rough-hewn beams. Eleanor's senses were awakened by the rich aromas of stewed vegetables, freshly baked bread, and fragrant herbs filling the space. At the center of the room sat two men, Karma's brothers, Dorj and Pema. Dorj was silent and contemplative, his dark eyes observing Eleanor with a quiet intensity. Pema, younger and more jovial, offered a wide smile, his laughter light and infectious even without words. The three brothers welcomed Eleanor with simple gestures, a nod, a gentle smile, and the offer of a seat beside them on a low wooden bench. There was no need for formal introductions. The language here was one of presence and respect. As they ate together, Eleanor noticed the rhythm of their interaction, unhurried, synchronized like the steady flow of the river she had come to love. No one spoke much. Words seemed unnecessary in the circle of trust and shared silence. Karma passed around bowls of rice and lentil stew, careful to include Eleanor in every offering. Dorj reached out with deliberate calm to break bread and share it among them, while Pema's playful glances lightened the mood, making Eleanor laugh despite herself. She realized how different this was from the world she had left behind. No rush to fill spaces with talk, no need to prove oneself with cleverness or wit. Here, companionship was felt through simple acts, sharing food, exchanging glances, sitting side by side. As the meal came to an end, Karma rose and gestured toward the small altar in the corner of the room, adorned with prayer flags, incense, and a small statue of a meditating figure. He motioned for Eleanor to join him in a brief silent prayer, a moment of connection beyond language. Eleanor closed her eyes and felt a deep calm settle in her chest. The silence was not empty, it was full of acceptance, belonging, and an unspoken promise that here she could simply be. That night, as she lay on a simple woven mat beneath a thin woolen blanket, Eleanor's mind replayed the quiet dinner again and again. For the first time in a long time, she felt the tentative stirrings of hope that this strange, wordless family might become her refuge, her new home. Days passed like soft ripples on a still lake, and Eleanor found herself increasingly woven into the quiet rhythm of village life. Yet, beneath the gentle routine, a subtle tension stirred, a question unspoken, lingering at the edges of her thoughts like a shadow she couldn't quite name. One afternoon, as the sun cast long golden fingers over the terraced fields, Karma invited Eleanor to accompany him to the home of the village elder, a dignified woman whose presence commanded quiet reverence. The elder's eyes held the wisdom of countless seasons, and her voice carried the weight of ancestral stories. Seated on woven mats around a low wooden table, Eleanor listened as the elder spoke softly in Zonka, the native tongue, while Karma translated carefully, his voice steady but gentle. She told Eleanor about the village's ancient custom, a tradition of polyandry, where one woman marries multiple brothers. This practice, born of necessity and respect, was meant to preserve the land's delicate balance and keep the family unified. Eleanor's heart quickened. The idea was foreign, even startling. It collided with everything she had been taught about love, marriage, and family. Back home, such a union might have been met with judgment, suspicion, or scorn. Here it was a sacred bond, a tapestry woven from threads of trust, sharing, and mutual support. The elder's words painted pictures of harmony rather than conflict. The brothers working side by side in the fields, the woman nurturing the family's collective soul, the children belonging to all. Love, she explained, was not possession or jealousy here, it was freedom to be shared without fear. Eleanor's mind swirled with questions and doubts. Was she capable of embracing a love so different from the one she had known? Could her heart stretch wide enough to hold such a complex web of connection? That evening, alone beneath a canopy of stars, Eleanor walked slowly along the riverbank, the elder's story echoing in her mind like a whispered chant. The cool night air brushed against her skin, carrying the scent of pine and earth, grounding her in the present. She thought of the loneliness she had carried for years, the sharp edges of isolation, the cold walls built by fear and expectation. What if this new path, strange as it seemed, could offer something she had never dared to hope for, belonging? A soft breeze stirred the prayer flags above her, their colors glowing faintly in the moonlight. Eleanor reached out and touched the fabric, feeling the delicate threads beneath her fingertips. It was as if the mountain itself was inviting her to let go of old beliefs and open her heart. Tears welled in her eyes, not of confusion, but of a profound awakening. She whispered into the night, voice trembling with a fragile resolve. I will try. I will learn to love in a new way. And with that vow, Eleanor took her first tentative step into a world where tradition breathed softly, and love was as boundless as the mountains surrounding her. Back in her small room, Eleanor sat by the wooden desk, the fading light of dusk casting long shadows over the scattered papers before her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked up the unopened letter from Anna, her daughter. The envelope felt heavier than it should, as though the words inside carried the weight of years of silence, disappointment, and misunderstanding. She hesitated, heart pounding, memories flooding her mind, birthday calls unanswered, missed milestones, the growing distance that neither time nor words had bridged. The letter represented more than just a message. It was a mirror reflecting her failures as a mother, a stark reminder of the life she had left behind. Eleanor finally broke the seal and unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the carefully written lines. Anna's words were a mix of pain and accusation, questioning Eleanor's sudden disappearance, her choices, and the silence that had grown like a wall between them. The sting of judgment was sharp, cutting deeper than Eleanor expected. She closed her eyes and swallowed hard, the room feeling suddenly colder and emptier. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of it, the guilt, the loneliness, the crushing sense of being misunderstood. But as the initial wave passed, something shifted inside her. She reached for her journal, the pages still blank but waiting patiently. With a deep breath, Eleanor began to write, not to justify or explain, but to release. Words poured out, raw and unfiltered, capturing the storm of emotions that churned beneath her calm exterior. She wrote about the suffocating life she had fled, the relentless pressure of expectations, and the desperate search for peace. She wrote about the fear of judgment that had kept her silent for so long, and the fragile hope that this journey might one day bring healing. Though the letter remained unsent, Eleanor felt a subtle lightness, a small crack in the armor of self-reproach. She realized that before she could bridge the distance to Anna, she first had to forgive herself. That night, as the village settled into quiet darkness, Eleanor lay awake listening to the distant call of a lone owl. The judgment of others no longer felt like a chain but a challenge, an invitation to find strength in her own truth, however unconventional it might be. She whispered into the stillness, "I will carry their doubts. But I will carry my own hope too." The days that followed were unlike anything Eleanor had ever experienced. Each morning, the village awoke slowly, the soft crow of a rooster, the distant murmur of monks chanting in the monastery, the steady rhythm of life unfolding gently like a prayer. Eleanor found herself waking with the sun, wrapped in the cool mountain air and the quiet comfort of this new place. The once unyielding walls she had built around her heart began to soften, brick by brick, under the warmth of unfamiliar smiles and tender glances. Karma remained a steadfast presence, his calm strength a silent anchor. But it was not only him. George with his quiet depth and thoughtful eyes, and Pema, whose laughter bubbled like a mountain stream, each began to carve a space in Eleanor's life, and her heart. At first, she grappled with the complexity of it all. How could love be shared without fracture? How could jealousy, possession, and fear be replaced by trust and generosity? These questions circled endlessly in her mind, but slowly, the answers revealed themselves not in words but in moments. One afternoon, as the village gathered for a festival beneath the towering pines, Eleanor watched the three brothers working together to prepare a traditional feast. Their movements were fluid and harmonious, an unspoken choreography born of years of shared life and mutual respect. Later, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, the brothers took her hand, one after the other, guiding her to a quiet spot by the riverbank. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the first stars began to twinkle overhead. There, without words, Eleanor felt the fullness of a love she had never known, a love that was not confined by jealousy or possession, but expansive and generous, like the mountains themselves. Karma's hand rested gently on her shoulder, George's fingers intertwined with hers, and Pema's warm breath brushed against her cheek. In that moment, the three hearts beating around her became one steady rhythm, and Eleanor's soul found a fragile peace. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of this new kind of love, one that embraced complexity, honored tradition, and transcended the loneliness she had carried for so long. That night, beneath a sky heavy with stars, Eleanor whispered a promise to herself. "I will open my heart, not to one, but to many. I will learn to love in ways I never imagined." And with that vow, she stepped fully into the rhythm of her new life, a life woven with the threads of trust, respect, and a love that knew no bounds. The orchard lay nestled on a gentle slope just beyond the village, its ancient trees heavy with ripe fruit, their branches intertwined like old friends. As twilight softened the sky into shades of deep blue and lavender, Eleanor found herself drawn there by an unspoken invitation, a quiet yearning to escape the growing complexity of her emotions and the new world she was beginning to inhabit. The air was cool and fragrant with the scent of blossoming flowers and damp earth, a delicate sweetness mingling with the crispness of the coming night. Fireflies began to flicker to life, tiny glowing lanterns weaving through the darkening branches, their soft pulses mirroring the fluttering in Eleanor's chest. Karma was already there, seated beneath a gnarled apple tree, his silhouette outlined by the fading light. When he saw Eleanor approach, his face broke into a gentle smile, warm and steady like the mountains themselves. George and Pema soon appeared, laughing softly as they emerged from the shadowed paths. The three brothers welcomed Eleanor without words, their presence a comforting embrace in the quiet orchard. Eleanor settled beside Karma, feeling the steady warmth of his hand reach for hers. George sat close, his calm gaze resting on her with quiet affection, while Pema's light-hearted teasing brought a smile to her lips, breaking through the last walls of hesitation. As darkness deepened, the fireflies multiplied, their golden lights weaving a tapestry of magic around them. The brothers began to hum a gentle melody, an ancient song that seemed to rise from the earth itself, soft, haunting, and full of longing. Moved by the music and the beauty of the moment, Eleanor felt her heart swell. The boundaries that had once defined her love and loyalty began to blur and melt away, replaced by a new understanding, that love could be fluid, shared, and still remain whole. Without a word, Karma leaned forward, pressing a tender kiss to Eleanor's forehead. George's fingers brushed softly against her cheek, and Pema's laughter twinkled like the fireflies dancing above. Tears pricked Eleanor's eyes, but they were tears of joy, joy at discovering a love that was richer and more expansive than she had ever imagined possible. Under the orchard's canopy and the watchful stars, Eleanor felt herself fully embraced by this rare and beautiful connection, a love that was at once complex and simple, ancient and timeless. And as the brothers' song drifted into the night, Eleanor whispered to herself, "Here in this light, I am home." The morning sun poured through the wooden lattice of Eleanor's small room, casting warm golden stripes across the woven mats and simple furnishings. Outside, the village was already stirring, children's laughter mingling with the distant lowing of yaks, and the faint clatter of daily chores beginning anew. Yet inside Eleanor's heart, a tempest had been brewing, demanding resolution. For days, she had wrestled with a storm of emotions, fear, hope, uncertainty, all tangled in the fragile threads of a life so different from the one she had known. The love she felt for Karma, Dorj, and Pema was undeniable, but the path forward was far from clear. She had spent long hours walking alone along the riverbank, seeking clarity in the steady flow of water, the whisper of the wind through pine needles, and the endless horizon of mountains that seemed to hold secrets older than time itself. Now, as the village prepared for the coming days of celebration, Eleanor knew she stood at a crossroads. To stay meant embracing a love that defied every convention she had ever known, a love shared by three brothers, bound by tradition, trust, and respect. To leave meant returning to a life familiar but hollow, filled with regrets and unanswered questions. Her gaze fell upon the small altar in the corner of her room, adorned with prayer flags and a single burning incense stick. She knelt, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply, seeking the wisdom of the mountains, the whisper of the ancestors. When she opened her eyes, the decision was clear. Eleanor would stay. In the days that followed, the village buzzed with quiet excitement. Preparations for the wedding ceremonies were underway, 3 separate celebrations honoring the unique bond she shared with each brother, each a testament to a love both ancient and deeply personal. Though doubt and fear still flickered in the corners of her mind, Eleanor felt a profound peace settling in her soul. She was choosing not just a place, but a new way of being, a family defined not by convention, but by sincerity and openness. As she walked through the village square, hands clasped tightly with Karma, Dorj, and Pema, Eleanor smiled softly, the weight of loneliness finally lifting. For the first time in years, she was home. The 3 ceremonies. The morning of the first ceremony dawned clear and crisp, the sun casting a gentle glow over the village nestled among the towering Himalayan peaks. The air was filled with a mingled sense of burning incense, fresh pine, and blooming rhododendrons, while distant chants floated softly from the monastery perched high above. Eleanor awoke early, her heart a fluttering mix of anticipation and calm. Today, she would be united with Karma in a ceremony steeped in tradition, honor, and quiet reverence. The village gathered slowly, faces radiant with warmth and respect, ready to witness this unusual but sacred union. Adorned in a richly embroidered kira, a traditional Bhutanese dress, Eleanor felt the weight of the moment settle over her like a protective shawl. Karma stood beside her, his eyes steady and kind, hands folded respectfully in front of him. The elder led the ceremony with measured words, invoking blessings for unity, love, and harmony. Each gesture was deliberate, the offering of prayer flags, the lighting of butter lamps, and the pouring of sacred water over their joined hands. Though Eleanor did not understand every word spoken in Zonka, the meaning was clear in the shared glances, the gentle smiles, and the collective breath held by all present. It was a binding of souls, an acceptance not only between 2 individuals but within the circle of community. Days later, the second ceremony took place beneath a canopy of fluttering prayer flags in the village square. This celebration with Dorj was marked by laughter and lightness. Dorj, quieter but deeply affectionate, shared moments of tender gestures, offering Eleanor a garland of wildflowers and a soft, knowing smile that reached his eyes. Villagers brought gifts of woven textiles and hand-carved wooden bowls, and children danced around the couple, their joyous energy infusing the gathering with life. Music filled the air as traditional flutes and drums set a lively rhythm, inviting everyone to partake in the festivities. Eleanor found herself laughing freely for the first time in years, caught up in the joy and simplicity of the moment. The love shared here was gentle, nurturing, a steady flame that warmed her from within. The third ceremony was held quietly at dawn by the river where Eleanor had first met Karma. The sky blushed pink and gold as Pema arrived with a shy smile and a bouquet of freshly picked wildflowers. This ceremony was intimate and serene. Words were few, replaced by shared glances and soft touches. Pema's playful spirit brought a lightness to the morning, his laughter mingling with the song of the river. As the sun rose higher, the 3 brothers and Eleanor came together, their hands joined in a circle of unity. The villagers watched with smiles, some with tears glistening in their eyes, honoring the rare and beautiful bond that had formed. Eleanor's heart swelled with a profound sense of belonging. In this land where mountains held ancient secrets, and traditions wove lives together like threads in a tapestry, she had found not just love, but a family, a home where her soul could rest. As the day faded into evening, Eleanor stood with Karma, Dorj, and Pema beneath a sky thick with stars, knowing that the journey ahead would be as complex and beautiful as the ceremonies that had bound them. And in that sacred space, surrounded by love shared and accepted, Eleanor whispered softly to herself, "I am not alone. I am home." The quiet of the village was shattered one afternoon by a sudden, unexpected storm. Dark clouds rolled over the mountain peaks, swallowing the blue sky and casting a heavy shadow over the terraced fields. A fierce wind whipped through the trees, bending branches and sending leaves spiraling in frantic dances. Eleanor sat alone inside her small room, watching the tempest rage outside the window. Her heart mirrored the turmoil of the weather, a swirling tempest of doubt, fear, and confusion she had tried to suppress for so long now breaking free. Despite the deep love she shared with Karma, Dorj, and Pema, Eleanor felt a growing restlessness inside, an ache she couldn't quite name. The complexity of her situation, the unconventional love, the whispers of judgment from some villagers, the weight of her own past, pressed down on her like the darkening sky. She recalled the letter from her daughter, the silence from friends left behind, and the life she had abandoned. Guilt mingled with longing, and the fierce independence that had carried her here now felt like a fragile shield, cracking under the strain. Tears slipped silently down Eleanor's cheeks as she curled into herself, the storm outside echoing the one within. She wondered if she had the strength to carry the burdens of this love, so different, so fragile. In the darkness, memories of laughter shared with the brothers flickered like distant lightning, reminders of the warmth and connection that had brought her here. Yet even those moments were tinged with fear, fear of losing herself, fear of never fully belonging, fear that the storm might consume all she had built. As the wind howled, Eleanor rose and moved to the small altar in the corner. Lighting a stick of incense, she knelt and whispered a prayer, seeking calm and clarity. The storm raged outside for hours, but inside slowly, a tentative peace began to settle. She realized that storms, both within and without, were part of the journey, necessary to clear the air and reveal the light beyond. Eleanor wrapped herself in a woolen shawl and looked out as the first rays of sun pierced the clouds, illuminating the drenched earth and glistening leaves. With a deep breath, she whispered to herself, "I will weather this storm. I will find my calm." And as the village emerged from the tempest, so too did Eleanor find a fragile strength rising within her, a quiet promise to face whatever lay ahead, anchored by love and hope. The soft glow of dawn spilled gently through the linen curtains of Eleanor's room, casting a warm light over the cradle nestled beside her bed. The tiny bundle within stirred, a faint whimper escaping from lips barely formed, a delicate hand stretching out instinctively. Eleanor sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the sleeping child, her heart swelling with a love so vast it seemed to fill the room entirely. This baby, her son, was a symbol of hope and unity, a fragile bridge between worlds, cultures, and hearts. Yet, beneath the calm surface of this new life, an unspoken secret hovered, one that both weighed heavily and freed Eleanor in ways she was only beginning to understand. The child's father, or rather the fathers, remained a mystery. In the village's ancient tradition, where one woman shared her life with three brothers bound in marriage and family, the question of paternity held little meaning. The baby belonged to all of them, a living embodiment of their shared love and commitment. Eleanor had come to accept this unconventional truth, but the secret still whispered through her thoughts in quiet moments, stirring complex emotions, curiosity, wonder, and a subtle fear of what the outside world might say. As she rocked the cradle gently, the soft cooing of the baby mingled with the distant sounds of the village waking. The brothers, Karma, Dorj, and Pema, were already at work in the fields, their footsteps light and sure on the familiar paths. Later that morning, they gathered at the home, their faces illuminated with pride and tenderness as they each took turns holding the baby. Their hands were rough yet gentle, fingers tracing the soft curve of the child's cheek, eyes shining with a collective joy that transcended words. Eleanor watched, a quiet smile gracing her lips. Here was a family forged not by conventional boundaries but by trust, respect, and shared love, a family strengthened by its very complexity. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Eleanor sat outside beneath the vast sky, cradling her son against her chest. The stars blinked down softly, ancient witnesses to a story that was both timeless and new. She whispered into the night air, voice full of hope and quiet certainty. "You are ours, and we are yours. Together, we will write our own story." And in that sacred moment, Eleanor felt the weight of the secret lift, replaced by the boundless light of love shared and lives intertwined. In the quiet solitude of her small room, Eleanor sat at the wooden desk bathed in the soft glow of the late afternoon sun. The air was still, carrying the faint scent of pine from the open window, mingling with the gentle hum of village life outside. Before her lay a sheet of paper, blank yet heavy with the weight of words unsaid for so long. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the pen, memories rushing in, of laughter once shared with Anna, birthday calls missed, silences that stretched into years, and the aching distance between mother and daughter. The pain of their estrangement pressed upon her, a constant ache beneath the calm she was trying to build. But today was different. Today, Eleanor was ready to reach across the vast ocean that separated them, to bridge the silence with truth and love. She began to write slowly, her words flowing from a place deep within her heart. "My dearest Anna, I write to you from a land far from the bustling streets we once called home. Here among towering mountains and whispering rivers, I have found a peace I never knew I needed, but I also carry with me the memory of you every day." Eleanor paused, the ache sharpening, but she pressed on. "I know my departure was sudden and without goodbye. I was lost in a storm of my own making, overwhelmed by the weight of expectations, fears, and a loneliness I could no longer bear. Leaving you was the hardest thing I ever did, and not a day has passed without thinking of you." Her pen hesitated, then continued. "Here I have learned that love is not always simple or easy, but it is always worth fighting for. I have found a new kind of family, bound by trust, respect, and an openness I wish we could share. I hope in time, you will come to understand my choice, not as abandonment, but as a journey toward healing." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but her hand remained steady. "I am sending this letter not to ask for forgiveness, but to offer you my heart, open, imperfect, and full of hope. I dream of the day we can speak again, truly speak, and begin to heal the spaces between us." She signed her name with a soft flourish and folded the letter carefully, imagining Anna's hands holding it someday, feeling the warmth of a mother's love despite the miles and years. As Eleanor sealed the envelope, a quiet resolve settled over her. She was ready to face whatever came next, carrying the love for her daughter like a beacon, a light to guide them both through the shadows. Outside, the village's evening bells tolled softly, and Eleanor whispered into the fading light, "For you always." The village had always been a place of quiet rhythms and gentle routines, nestled between the towering peaks and verdant valleys. But one crisp morning, the familiar peace was stirred by the arrival of a stranger, a young woman named Kieran, whose presence would soon ripple through Eleanor's life like a fresh mountain breeze. Eleanor first noticed Kieran as she stepped off the rickety bus that wound its way through the narrow mountain roads. Kieran carried with her a small worn backpack, and her eyes held a mixture of determination and vulnerability, a story yet untold. The villagers watched curiously as she made her way toward the cluster of wooden homes, her steps hesitant but purposeful. Karma was the first to approach her, offering a warm smile and a helping hand, welcoming her into their fold with the same quiet grace he had shown Eleanor. Over the following days, Eleanor observed Kieran settling into village life with a mixture of awe and empathy. Kieran was not like anyone Eleanor had met before. She was fiercely independent yet carried a loneliness that seemed to echo Eleanor's own when she first arrived. There was a restlessness in Kieran's gaze, a hunger for something beyond the mountains, yet a deep respect for the traditions that bound the village together. Their paths crossed one afternoon by the riverbank. Eleanor was sitting on a smooth stone, writing in her journal, when Kieran approached, hesitating before sitting beside her. They exchanged shy smiles, the beginnings of an unspoken understanding forming between them. Kieran shared stories of distant cities and dreams unfulfilled, while Eleanor listened, her heart opening to this new friendship. In Kieran's presence, Eleanor saw reflections of her own journey, the search for belonging, the struggle to reconcile past and present, and the yearning for a home not just of place, but of spirit. As days turned to weeks, Kieran became woven into the fabric of the village, her laughter joining the chorus of life that Eleanor had come to cherish. The brothers welcomed her with open arms, and Eleanor found comfort in this expanding circle of connection. One evening, under a sky ablaze with stars, Eleanor and Kieran sat by the fire, sharing hopes and fears in the flickering light. Kieran confessed her fears of never truly belonging, and Eleanor, with quiet conviction, reassured her that home was not a fixed place but a feeling nurtured by love and acceptance. The arrival of Kieran brought new light into Eleanor's world, a reminder that no matter how far one travels, the journey toward healing is often shared, and sometimes, the most unexpected arrivals become the greatest gifts. As the fire crackled and the village settled into peaceful slumber, Eleanor whispered into the night air, grateful for the unexpected turn their lives had taken. "Welcome, Kieran. You are not alone." Between two worlds. Eleanor stood at the edge of the village, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the towering mountains kissed the sky. The crisp mountain air filled her lungs, but inside, a storm of conflicting emotions churned quietly, torn between the world she had left behind and the one she was slowly coming to call home. Her days were now woven from two threads: the steady, unhurried rhythm of life in the village, filled with simple joys and deep connections, and the distant echoes of her past life in Chicago, the relentless pace, the loneliness, and the complex web of relationships she had left behind. Letters from Anna arrived sporadically, their words carrying the weight of unresolved pain and fragile hope. Each letter was a thread pulling Eleanor back toward a life she had tried to escape, yet her heart also yearned for the peaceful embrace of the mountains and the brothers who had become her family. She found herself waking in the quiet hours of dawn, torn between reaching out to her daughter and retreating into the sanctuary of her new world. Memories flooded her mind: Anna's childhood laughter, the arguments they'd never fully resolved, the long nights spent staring at a phone that never rang. At the same time, the laughter of Karma, Dorj, and Pema filled the air around her, their presence a balm to the wounds she carried. Their shared love was complex and unfamiliar, yet it nurtured a part of Eleanor that had long been starved for connection and belonging. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and cast a golden glow over the fields, Eleanor walked along the winding path that separated the village from the forest. She carried with her a small bundle of letters, words she had written but never sent, feelings she had yet to voice. She paused beneath an ancient cedar tree, its branches reaching wide like open arms, and allowed herself to sit and breathe deeply. The world around her seemed to hold its breath, the gentle rustle of leaves whispering secrets of resilience and hope. Eleanor realized that she no longer needed to choose between her past and present. Instead, she could hold both worlds within her, letting the pain and love intermingle like rivers merging into the sea. In that moment of stillness, she whispered softly, "I am both of these worlds, and I am whole." As twilight settled and stars began to twinkle overhead, Eleanor felt a quiet peace, a fragile, beautiful balance born from the courage to embrace complexity and the grace to forgive herself. The soft murmur of the evening settled gently over the village as Eleanor prepared for a quiet night. The hearth's warm glow flickered against the walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed to sway with the rhythm of her thoughts. The scent of drying herbs and faint traces of incense hung in the air, wrapping the room in a familiar comfort. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the door broke the tranquility, making Eleanor startle. It was late, too late for an unannounced visitor. Her heart quickened as she approached, hesitating before opening the door. Standing there, silhouetted against the fading light, was a figure she had not expected, a woman weary and travel-worn, yet with eyes that held a fierce determination. The stranger's gaze met Eleanor's, a silent question hanging in the cool evening air. Without a word, the woman stepped inside, and Eleanor closed the door gently behind her. The visitor's presence filled the small room with a new energy, an unspoken urgency that demanded attention. Over the course of the evening, the woman shared her story, tales of hardship and escape, of battles fought far from the serene mountains Eleanor now called home. She spoke of lost family, of betrayal, and of a desperate search for refuge. Eleanor listened intently, her own experiences intertwining with the stranger's pain. She saw in the woman's eyes reflections of her own journey, the yearning for safety, for understanding, for a place to belong. The brothers soon joined them, their expressions a mixture of concern and resolve. Together, they welcomed the visitor, offering shelter and the promise of protection within the village's embrace. That night, beneath the watchful stars, Eleanor felt the fragile threads of her life stretch to include this new soul, a reminder that healing was not a solitary path, but one often traveled alongside unexpected companions. As the visitor settled into the warmth of the hearth's glow, Eleanor whispered softly, "You are safe here. You are not alone." The village was wrapped in the soft embrace of early morning, the mist curling gently around the wooden homes and the emerald terraces that stretched toward the mountains. Eleanor moved quietly through the narrow paths, her footsteps muffled by the damp earth, her breath visible in the crisp air. That day, a wordless understanding had begun to deepen between Eleanor and the brothers, Karma, Dorj, and Pema, one born not from spoken promises but from shared glances, gentle touches, and the comforting rhythm of presence. As they gathered in the small courtyard, Sunlight filtering through the fluttering prayer flags, Eleanor felt a calm settle within her chest. No need for elaborate speeches or explanations. Their connection was woven through everyday moments. The way Dorj's hand rested lightly on her back as they walked, how Karma's eyes held steady reassurance, and the warmth of Pema's playful smile that softened even the hardest days. Together, they tended the small vegetable garden, their hands working side by side in quiet harmony. Eleanor felt the earth beneath her fingertips, the life growing from the soil mirroring the tender roots taking hold in her heart. Later, as evening draped the village in soft shadows, Eleanor sat beside the river where the water sang a gentle song. The brothers joined her, and without a single word spoken, they shared the space, their presence a silent promise of unity and trust. In that profound stillness, Eleanor understood that love did not always need to be spoken aloud to be felt deeply. Sometimes, silence held the greatest truths, and the unspoken bonds were the strongest. Her heart full, Eleanor closed her eyes and let the quiet wash over her like a soothing balm. The weight of past doubts lifted, replaced by a serene acceptance of the love that embraced her in all its complexities. As stars began to peek through the velvet sky, she whispered softly to the night, "In silence we are whole." The soft light of dawn seeped through the windows of Eleanor's home, painting the room in hues of gold and amber. The village was stirring to life outside, the distant sounds of roosters crowing and children's laughter weaving into the crisp morning air. Yet inside, a deeper awakening was unfolding, a transformation that went beyond the simple passage of time. Eleanor sat on the worn wooden bench beneath the wide eaves, cradling her sleeping son in her arms. His breath was steady and calm, a rhythmic melody that echoed the steady beat of her own heart. Around them, the world felt suspended, wrapped in a peaceful quiet that seemed to hold the promise of something lasting and true. The journey that had brought Eleanor here had been marked by struggle, doubt, and moments of fierce loneliness. But now, as she looked at the small family she had forged with Karma, Dorj and Pema, she understood that family was not defined by tradition or convention alone. It was built from love's willingness to expand, to embrace complexity, and to nurture without condition. The brothers moved about the home with practiced ease, their laughter mingling as they prepared a simple meal. Each carried a role not because it was expected, but because it was chosen, an act of devotion to the shared life they cherished. Their bond with Eleanor and their son was evident in every glance, every gentle touch, every quiet word. Children from the village would often visit, their faces lighting up as they gathered around to hear stories of distant places and new beginnings. Eleanor watched as her son, cradled safely against her, reached tiny hands toward the world with curious wonder, a child born not just of one father, but of many hearts united in love. In this home, jealousy had no place. Instead, there was a rhythm of trust, a dance of understanding, and a tapestry of connection that wrapped them all in warmth. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the sky blazed with the colors of twilight, Eleanor stood beside the river with the brothers and her son. The water flowed steady and sure, a reminder that life itself was ever-changing yet enduring. She took a deep breath, feeling the fullness of her new family settle in her soul. Smiling softly, she whispered, "This is love. This is family. This is home." And in that moment, surrounded by those she loved, Eleanor knew she had found something rare and precious, a new kind of family, bound not by simple rules but by the fierce, unyielding power of love. The night had been long and restless, the mountain winds whispering secrets through the cracks of Eleanor's small home. As the first light of dawn began to seep over the horizon, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, a profound stillness settled over the village, a stillness heavy with anticipation and quiet farewell. Eleanor sat quietly beside the cradle where her son slept, his chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. The past months had been a whirlwind of love, growth, and transformation, and now, as she watched the sunrise, a bittersweet realization took root deep within her heart. This morning would mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Soon, she would have to leave the sanctuary of the mountains, to return to a world that had once felt like a prison but now held new meaning. The three brothers, Karma, Dorj, and Pema, stood silently outside, their faces etched with a mixture of sorrow and strength. They had shared a journey unlike any other, bound together by love that defied convention and time. Now, as the sun's first rays kissed the peaks, they prepared to say goodbye, not just to Eleanor, but to the life they had built together. Eleanor wrapped a shawl tightly around her shoulders, stepping outside into the crisp morning air. The village was just beginning to stir, smoke curling from chimneys, the soft chatter of early risers, and the faint clatter of hooves on stone paths. She walked to the riverbank where the brothers waited, the water flowing steady and clear beneath the awakening sky. Their hands reached for hers, fingers intertwining in a silent promise, a bond unbroken by distance or time. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes as she whispered her gratitude for the love, the lessons, and the family she had found in this remote corner of the world. Together, they watched the sun climb higher, its golden light spilling over the valley like a blessing. In that moment, Eleanor felt both the ache of farewell and the warmth of new beginnings. As the last hues of dawn faded into day, she breathed deeply and whispered, "Though this is the last sunrise we share here, our hearts will remain forever entwined." And with that, Eleanor stepped forward into the unknown, carrying with her the enduring light of love, the strength of chosen family, and the promise of a future shaped by courage and hope. Eleanor's story teaches us that love is not one size fits all. It is complex, messy, and beautiful, sometimes found where we least expect it. Through challenges, doubts, and moments of profound joy, she learns that family is chosen and love can transcend any boundary. Her journey is a powerful reminder that happiness comes not from following the world's expectations, but from embracing our truth and opening our hearts. May this story inspire you to redefine what love means in your own life and find courage to follow your own path. Thank you for sharing Eleanor's incredible journey with us. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to be part of our community. Don't forget to click the bell so you never miss a story that will inspire and move you. Together, let's celebrate love in all its beautiful forms.